They told you weight gain was about calories. They told you willpower was the problem. They told you to move more and eat less. But what if the real story has been hiding in your bloodstream this entire time? What if the hormones silently controlling your hunger, your fat storage, your energy crashes, and even your brain fog is the true mastermind behind whether you burn fat or store it? That hormone is insulin. Insulin is not evil, it is essential for life. Every time you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises. In response, your pancreas releases insulin to move that sugar out of your bloodstream and into your cells. That's normal physiology. That's survival. But here's the part no one explains clearly enough. Insulin is also a fat storage hormone. When insulin is elevated, your body cannot efficiently burn fat. It's metabolically locked. Scientific studies have repeatedly demonstrated that high insulin levels suppress lipolysis, the breakdown of fat. When insulin is elevated, your fat cells receive a biochemical signal that says, store energy, do not release it. It doesn't matter how much body fat you have. If insulin remains high, your body behaves as if it's in storage mode, not burn mode. Now here's the shocking reality. The modern diet keeps insulin elevated almost all day long. Breakfast cereal, toast, fruit juice, snack bars, pasta, rice, even healthy whole grains. Each spike triggers another wave of insulin. And when this pattern repeats for years, cells begin to resist insulin's signal. The pancreas responds by producing even more. This condition, insulin resistance, is now estimated to affect the majority of adults in developed nations. Some research suggests up to 88% of Americans show at least one marker of metabolic dysfunction. Let that sink in. Nearly 9 out of 10 adults are metabolically unhealthy. And insulin resistance does not just lead to weight gain. It is strongly associated with type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and even Alzheimer's disease, which some researchers now call type 3 diabetes because of its strong link to impaired insulin signaling in the brain. When insulin stays high, fat burning shuts down. When insulin drops, fat burning turns on. That is not a trend. That is biochemistry. Ketosis is not a fad. It is a metabolic state humans have entered naturally for thousands of years during periods of low carbohydrate intake or fasting. When carbohydrate intake drops low enough, insulin levels fall. As insulin drops, the body is finally allowed to release stored fat. That fat travels to the liver, where it is converted into molecules called ketones. These ketones become an alternative fuel source, especially for the brain. And here's what makes this powerful. The brain thrives on ketones. Research has shown that ketones provide a more stable energy supply compared to glucose. Many people report improved mental clarity, reduced brain fog, and steadier mood when in ketosis. Some clinical trials have even explored ketogenic diets for epilepsy, showing dramatic reductions in seizure frequency. That is not hype. That is documented in medical literature for over a century. But the true magic of ketosis isn't magic at all. It's insulin control. When you eat in a way that keeps insulin low, healthy fats, moderate protein, minimal carbohydrates, you allow your body to switch fuel sources. You move from being a sugar burner to being a fat burner. And when that switch becomes consistent, something profound happens. Hunger stabilizes, cravings decrease, energy levels even out. The constant cycle of spikes and crashes begins to fade. Why? Because insulin doesn't just control fat storage. It influences hunger hormones like leptin and ghrelin. Chronic high insulin disrupts these signals, making you feel hungry even when you have abundant stored energy. Lower insulin levels help restore hormonal communication between fat cells and the brain. Your body finally senses that it has fuel available. This is why simply cutting calories without lowering insulin often fails long term. If insulin remains elevated, your body perceives a threat to its energy reserves. Metabolic rate can drop, hunger increases, fat loss stalls. It becomes a battle of willpower against biology. But when insulin drops, biology begins to work with you instead of against you. Multiple controlled trials comparing low carbohydrate diets to low fat diets have found that low carb approaches often produce greater improvements in triglycerides, HDL cholesterol, and blood sugar control. Triglycerides, a key marker of metabolic health, can drop significantly when carbohydrate intake is reduced. HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, often rises. Blood glucose variability stabilizes. These are not cosmetic changes. These are markers tied directly to cardiovascular risk. And here's the part that should make you question everything you've been told. Ketosis does not require starvation. It requires strategic eating that prevents excessive insulin spikes. Healthy fats do not spike insulin. Non-starchy vegetables have minimal impact. Moderate protein supports muscle without overwhelming glucose production when balanced correctly. The goal is not zero insulin. The goal is controlled insulin. When insulin is stable and low between meals, your body has access to its stored fat. Imagine carrying tens of thousands of calories on your body, but being unable to access them because insulin is constantly elevated. That is the metabolic prison so many people are living in. Ketosis is the metabolic key. Even more compelling, emerging research suggests that lowering insulin levels can reduce inflammation markers in some individuals. Chronic inflammation is a driver of many modern diseases. While nutrition is only one piece of the puzzle, insulin regulation appears to play a meaningful role in systemic inflammation and oxidative stress. This is not about extremes. It is about understanding cause and effect. Carbohydrates raise blood sugar raises insulin. Elevated insulin blocks fat burning. Lower insulin allows fat burning. That chain reaction determines whether you are storing energy or using it. The tragedy is that many people blame themselves for metabolic conditions that are driven by hormonal imbalance. They think they lack discipline. In reality, they have been riding a hormonal roller coaster designed by a high-carbohydrate food environment. When you shift the focus from calories to insulin control, everything changes. Meals become strategic. Snacking becomes unnecessary. Energy becomes steady. The body becomes metabolically flexible, able to switch between fuels efficiently. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all is this: the body wants to heal. When insulin is no longer chronically elevated, systems begin to recalibrate. Blood sugar stabilizes. Fat oxidation increases. Hunger cues normalize. The chaos quiets. Ketosis is not about chasing ketone numbers for bragging rights. It is about creating an internal hormonal environment where fat burning is possible. It is about removing the constant insulin spikes that keep the body locked in storage mode. It is about restoring metabolic freedom. So the next time someone tells you weight loss is just about eating less and moving more, remember the deeper story. Remember the hormone silently shaping your metabolism. Remember that insulin is the gatekeeper. Control insulin and you control access to your stored energy. Control insulin and you unlock fat burning. Control insulin and you change the metabolic conversation entirely. And that is not opinion, that is physiology. For decades, you were told that fat was dangerous, that butter would clog your arteries, that egg yolks were ticking time bombs, that red meat was the villain behind every heart attack. Grocery store shelves filled with low-fat promises, and the world believed it was getting healthier. And yet, during the same period that fat intake dropped, obesity rates exploded. Type 2 diabetes skyrocketed. Fatty liver disease began appearing in teenagers. Something in the story didn't add up. Here is the truth that changes everything. Fat is not the enemy. In the right metabolic context, fat is fuel, and protein is precision. When you lower carbohydrates and bring insulin down, your body must switch energy systems. Glucose is no longer the primary fuel. Fat becomes the main source of energy, and the liver converts fatty acids into ketones, molecules that can power your brain, heart, and muscles with remarkable efficiency. This is not theory. It is basic human physiology documented in metabolic research for decades. Healthy dietary fats, like those found in avocados, olive oil, butter, fatty fish, and coconut oil, have minimal impact on insulin. That matters more than most people realize, because insulin is the gatekeeper of fat burning. When insulin remains low, stored body fat can be released and used as fuel. When insulin spikes, fat burning slows or stops. Studies comparing low-carbohydrate diets to low-fat diets repeatedly show that low-carb approaches often lead to greater reductions in triglycerides and improvements in HDL cholesterol. Triglycerides are strongly linked to cardiovascular risk. When carbohydrate intake drops and fat intake increases appropriately, triglycerides often fall dramatically. That is not what the old narrative predicted, but it is what metabolic data continues to show. And then there is the brain. Your brain consumes a tremendous amount of energy. In a high carbohydrate environment, it relies primarily on glucose. But when carbohydrates are reduced and ketones are produced, the brain adapts. Research has demonstrated that ketones provide a stable fuel source and may produce fewer reactive oxygen species compared to glucose metabolism. That stability is why ketogenic therapies have been used for over 100 years to help manage epilepsy. It is why many individuals report sharper focus and steadier energy when they become fat adapted. But here is where precision becomes critical. Protein. Protein is not optional. It is the structural foundation of your body. Muscles, enzymes, immune cells, hormones, neurotransmitters all depend on amino acids. Inadequate protein intake can lead to muscle loss, weakened immunity, slower recovery, and metabolic slowdown. Especially during weight loss, preserving lean mass is non-negotiable. Research consistently shows that adequate protein intake helps maintain muscle while losing fat, protecting metabolic rate in the process. Yet too much protein in a ketogenic framework can quietly sabotage ketosis. When protein intake exceeds the body's immediate needs, certain amino acids can be converted into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. This is a survival mechanism. Your body is intelligent. It ensures that critical tissues always have access to glucose when necessary, but excessive protein intake can raise blood glucose enough to increase insulin levels, potentially reducing ketone production. This does not mean protein is dangerous. It means protein requires balance. The phrase high fat, moderate protein, very low carb is not random. It reflects metabolic chemistry. Fat becomes the primary fuel. Protein supports structure and function. Carbohydrates are minimized to keep insulin controlled. Consider this. When you eat a meal rich in refined carbohydrates and low in fat, blood sugar spikes rapidly. Insulin surges, energy peaks, and then crashes. Hunger returns quickly. But when you eat a meal centered around healthy fats and adequate protein, digestion slows. Blood sugar rises minimally. Satiety hormones activate. Research shows that dietary fat and protein stimulate hormones like cholecystokinin and peptide YY, which signal fullness to the brain. You stay satisfied longer, not because of willpower, but because of physiology. And the type of fat matters. Omega-3 fatty acids found in fatty fish like salmon have been studied for their anti-inflammatory properties and cardiovascular benefits. Extra virgin olive oil, a staple of the Mediterranean diet, is rich in monounsaturated fats and polyphenols that have been associated with improved heart health outcomes. These are not fringe ideas. They are supported by large bodies of epidemiological and clinical research. Meanwhile, natural saturated fats, once demonized, are being re-examined. The relationship between saturated fat and heart disease is more complex than previously portrayed. Many modern analyses suggest that context matters. Overall diet quality, carbohydrate intake, inflammation levels, and metabolic health all influence cardiovascular risk far more than a single macronutrient in isolation. Now let's talk about muscle, because muscle is metabolic currency. Muscle tissue improves insulin sensitivity. It acts as a reservoir for glucose disposal. Preserving it is essential for long-term metabolic health. Adequate protein intake supports muscle maintenance, especially during fat loss. Studies show that higher protein diets can help prevent the decline in resting metabolic rate that often accompanies calorie restriction. But if protein is pushed excessively high while carbohydrates are low, some individuals may struggle to maintain deeper levels of ketosis. The solution is not fear, it is awareness. Most research suggests that moderate protein intake, often around 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of reference body weight, supports muscle without overwhelming glucose production for most people in a ketogenic framework. Precision, not extremes. When fat becomes your primary fuel, something remarkable happens over time. The body becomes metabolically flexible. It learns to switch efficiently between stored fat and dietary fat. Mitochondria, the energy factories of your cells, adapt. Fat oxidation increases. Energy becomes more stable. Many individuals report fewer crashes, fewer cravings, and a newfound sense of control over hunger. This is not magic, it is adaptation. For decades, public health messaging emphasized reducing fat without equal emphasis on reducing refined carbohydrates. Food manufacturers replaced fat with sugar and starch to maintain taste. The result was a food environment that chronically stimulated insulin, and metabolic disease followed. Reintroducing healthy fats while moderating protein within a low carbohydrate framework shifts that hormonal landscape. Insulin remains controlled. Fat becomes accessible. Protein preserves strength. Hunger stabilizes. Energy steadies. And here is the emotional truth beneath the science. Your body is not broken. It responds to signals. Fat is a signal. Protein is a signal. Carbohydrates are a signal. Hormones interpret those signals and decide whether you store or burn. When you align fat and protein correctly, you are not cheating the system. You are working with it. Fat is fuel. Protein is precision. Together, they create a metabolic environment where ketosis can thrive without muscle loss, without constant hunger, without the roller coaster of spikes and crashes. The story was never about fearing fat. It was about understanding hormones. It was about respecting balance. It was about giving the body what it needs and not overwhelming it with what it doesn't. In the end, this is not about trends or headlines. It is about biochemistry unfolding inside you every second. Choose your fuel wisely. Choose your protein intentionally, and let your metabolism do what it was designed to do. Most people think they're in ketosis. They feel like they are. They hope they are. They assume they are. But metabolism does not run on hope. It runs on chemistry, and chemistry leaves evidence. If you are not measuring, you are guessing. And guessing is why so many people stall, struggle, and silently blame themselves. Your body is a biochemical laboratory operating 24 hours a day. Every bite of food triggers hormonal signals. Every spike in blood sugar sends a message. Every rise in insulin shifts you either toward fat storage or fat burning. These shifts are measurable, they are trackable, they are not mysteries. Ketosis is defined by the presence of ketones in the bloodstream, typically beta-hydroxybutyrate levels above 0.5 nmol. That is not a motivational quote. That is a measurable metabolic threshold used in scientific research. Without measuring ketones, you cannot confirm whether your body has truly shifted into fat-burning mode. Research on low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets consistently shows that individuals who monitor biomarkers, such as blood glucose and ketones, tend to achieve better metabolic outcomes. Why? Because feedback changes behavior. When you see how your body responds to certain foods, the learning becomes personal, immediate, unforgettable. You may believe a certain snack is low carb, but your glucometer might tell a different story. Blood glucose meters have revealed shocking truths for many people. Foods marketed as keto-friendly sometimes cause unexpected glucose rises. Artificial sweeteners, hidden starches, even stress and poor sleep can elevate blood sugar. Without data, you would never know. And here is the deeper science. Glucose variability matters. Studies show that frequent blood sugar spikes and crashes contribute to oxidative stress and inflammation. Even in individuals without diagnosed diabetes, high glycemic variability has been associated with vascular damage. Stability is protective. Stability is measurable. Testing fasting blood glucose in the morning provides a window into your metabolic baseline. Is your liver releasing excess glucose overnight? Is insulin resistance present? Over time, consistent tracking can reveal patterns. Improvements in fasting glucose often reflect improved insulin sensitivity. That is not cosmetic progress. That is metabolic healing in motion. Then there are ketones. Measuring blood ketones shows whether fat is truly being converted into usable fuel. Nutritional ketosis is not the same as ketoacidosis, a dangerous condition seen in uncontrolled type 1 diabetes. Nutritional ketosis is a controlled physiological state where insulin is low but present and ketones rise moderately. The distinction is critical and well documented in medical literature. When you measure ketones, you remove doubt. If levels are low, you adjust carbohydrate intake. You examine protein quantity. You evaluate hidden sugars. If levels are strong but energy feels low, you examine electrolytes, hydration, sleep. Data transforms confusion into clarity. And then there is consistency. Research on behavioral science repeatedly shows that consistency outweighs intensity. Extreme dietary changes that cannot be sustained lead to relapse. Relapse leads to frustration. Frustration leads to abandonment. But consistent, measured habits create adaptation. Metabolic adaptation takes time. Mitochondria must upregulate enzymes involved in fat oxidation. Muscles must adjust to using fatty acids efficiently. The brain must adapt to ketones as a primary fuel source. Studies on fat adaptation suggest that full metabolic flexibility can take weeks, sometimes longer. Without consistency, the adaptation resets. Many people cycle in and out of ketosis, high-carb weekends, cheat days, unplanned splurges. Each time carbohydrates surge, insulin rises, glycogen stores refill, ketone production drops, the metabolic switch flips back. Re-entering ketosis can take days for some individuals. Repeatedly interrupting the process slows adaptation. Consistency stabilizes hormones. Insulin patterns become predictable. Hunger signals calm. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, begins to align with true energy needs rather than blood sugar crashes. Leptin signaling may improve as insulin resistance decreases. These are not overnight transformations. They are cumulative biological responses. Consider the data on type 2 diabetes remission using low-carbohydrate approaches. Clinical programs that incorporate regular glucose monitoring and structured support have shown significant reductions in HbA1c, medication use, and even disease reversal for some patients. HbA1c reflects average blood glucose over approximately 3 months. Watching that number fall is not just encouraging, it is evidence of reduced glycation damage inside the body. And what about weight? The scale alone is a blunt instrument. It does not distinguish between fat, muscle, and water. But combining consistent nutrition with measured biomarkers gives a fuller picture. Waist circumference decreases, triglycerides drop, HDL rises, fasting insulin improves. These changes often precede dramatic scale shifts. There is something psychologically powerful about measurement. It replaces emotion with evidence. It replaces fear with facts. It removes the illusion that your body is unpredictable. Patterns emerge. You learn that poor sleep raises fasting glucose, that stress elevates blood sugar even without carbs, that a certain protein portion pushes you slightly out of ketosis. Knowledge becomes leverage, and leverage builds confidence. But here is the caution. Measurement is a tool, not an obsession. The goal is not to chase the highest ketone number. More ketones do not automatically mean more fat loss. Extremely high readings may simply reflect high dietary fat intake rather than body fat burning. Context matters. Trends matter more than single readings. Consistency also extends beyond food. Sleep deprivation has been shown to impair insulin sensitivity in as little as 1 week. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, which can raise blood glucose independent of diet. Physical activity improves insulin sensitivity by increasing glucose uptake in muscles. Metabolism is an ecosystem. Data helps you see the ecosystem clearly. Imagine navigating a dark forest without a compass. Every turn feels uncertain. Every setback feels personal. Now imagine carrying a map and a compass. You still walk the path, but you know where you are. That is what testing provides. The shocking health fact is this: millions are metabolically unhealthy without knowing it. Insulin resistance can exist for years before diabetes is diagnosed. Blood glucose may appear normal while fasting insulin is already elevated. By the time overt disease appears, metabolic dysfunction has often been present for a decade or more. Early measurement offers early intervention. You cannot change what you refuse to measure. Consistency compounds. Small daily decisions, choosing healthy fats, moderating protein, minimizing carbohydrates, stack over weeks. Weeks become months. Months become measurable change. Mitochondria adapt. Hormones stabilize. Energy evens out. Cravings fade into the background. This is not a crash diet narrative. It is a metabolic recalibration story, and recalibration demands repetition. Test, adjust, stay consistent, observe, repeat. Over time, you will notice something profound. Hunger no longer controls you. Energy becomes predictable. Brain fog lifts. Afternoon crashes disappear. The need for constant snacking fades. These subjective changes align with objective data. That alignment is powerful because in a world overflowing with nutritional noise, data becomes your anchor. It silences confusion. It guides precision. It transforms keto from a trend into a targeted metabolic strategy. And perhaps most importantly, it restores trust. Not blind trust, earned trust. Trust built on measurable improvement in your own body. Consistency plus data equals clarity. Clarity leads to confidence. Confidence sustains change. Your metabolism is not random. It responds to signals. When you measure those signals and stay consistent with the inputs, the outcomes stop being mysterious. This is not about perfection. It is about feedback. It is about choosing evidence over assumption. It is about understanding that biology leaves clues and being willing to look at them. Because in the end, the difference between hoping you are in ketosis and knowing you are in ketosis is not motivation. It is measurement.